You left the baby's bottles out again. This is how bacteria grows, Rachel. She said it before she even set her purse down. It was 7:52 inches the morning. I was still in my robe, and my mother-in-law was already standing in my kitchen. Having walked in through the garage with the code my husband gave her 14 months ago without once asking if I was okay with it. My name is Rachel Mercer. I'm 29 years old. I have a 2-year-old daughter named Lily, a husband named Daniel who leaves for work before the sun comes up, and a mother-in-law named Sandra, who has treated my home like a second address since the week we moved in. She didn't knock that morning. She never knocks. She punches in the 4 digits. The garage door groans open. The door to the mudroom swings wide, and then her voice appears somewhere inside my house before I've even registered she's there. Like a weather system moving in. No warning, no permission, just arrival. I used to tell myself it was fine, that she was helpful. She'd bring over food containers labeled with reheating instructions, as though I'd never operated a microwave. She'd fold the laundry I'd left in the dryer, then leave it stacked on the bed in a way that made it impossible not to notice she'd been in every room. She'd text Daniel little updates. Just stopped by to drop off dinner. The house looked a little chaotic, but I tidied up the living room. Hope that's okay. It was never okay. But I didn't say that, because Daniel would look at the text, look at me, and say the sentence I came to dread more than almost anything else in my marriage. She's just trying to help, Rach. She's just trying to help. Those words became a wall between us. Every time I brought up a boundary, every time I said I didn't feel comfortable with her having open access to our home, Daniel would soften his eyes and say some version of it. Mom means well. She gets anxious. She lost my dad 2 years ago, and she just wants to feel close to family. She's just trying to help. So, I let it go. Month after month, I let it go. The comments were the hardest part to absorb because they arrived so softly. She'd look at Lily's lunch plate and say, "I just read that too much screen time and processed foods are linked to speech delays. Did you know that?" She'd glance at the living room and say, "Children actually need more order than we think. It affects their sense of security." Every sentence was wrapped in the language of concern. Every sentence landed like a small blade. Daniel missed most of it. He'd come home after she was gone, and the house would look fine. Better than fine, actually. She'd have wiped the counters and organized the pantry and done something to the throw pillows that made them look more symmetrical. And he'd walk in and exhale like a man arriving somewhere peaceful, not realizing someone else had spent the day quietly dismantling his wife's confidence. The shift happened gradually. Her drop-ins went from twice a week to almost daily. She started arriving earlier. She started staying longer. She started having opinions about Lily's sleep schedule, about the pediatrician we'd chosen, about the fact that I worked from home doing freelance design work instead of, in her words, fully dedicating my focus to the baby. She said it gently, of course. Some women can balance both. I just want to make sure Lily is getting everything she needs. That was the sentence that opened a door in me. A cold, quiet door I hadn't known was there. Because the way she said it, the tilt of her head, the concerned pinch of her brows, it wasn't about Lily. It was a verdict. About me. And I started to wonder if she'd been delivering that verdict to other people. I found out she had. It was Daniel's older sister, my sister-in-law, who told me. We were at a birthday party for a cousin's kid, standing near the food table. And she pulled me aside with a look I didn't understand at first. She said, "I probably shouldn't say anything, but I'd want someone to tell me." She told me that at a family dinner 2 weeks prior, one I hadn't attended because Lily had a cold, Sandra had made comments, nothing explosive. Nothing that could be quoted as clearly harmful, but the kind of comments that plant seeds. She'd mentioned that she'd been a little worried about Lily's environment. She'd said I seemed overwhelmed. She'd used the phrase struggling to cope, then immediately said she wasn't judging, she was just concerned. Struggling to cope. I drove home from that party, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went pale. I walked inside, put Lily down for her nap, sat on the edge of the bathtub, and stared at the tile for a long time. Not crying, just processing. She wasn't dropping by to help. She was collecting evidence. I thought about every visit I could remember. The comments logged in my memory now with new meaning. The times she'd photographed something I'd assumed she was sending cute pictures of Lily to her friends. The times she'd moved things around and I'd thought it was just her compulsive tidiness. The questions she asked about our schedule, about who watched Lily on the days I had client calls, about whether Lily was eating enough vegetables. She hadn't been making conversation. She'd been building a file. I didn't sleep much that night. But I also didn't panic. Something had shifted in me, and the shift wasn't toward fear. It was toward clarity. She wanted me to look unstable. She wanted there to be a record of chaos and inadequacy, so that someday, somehow, she could be the one who stepped in. Not to help me, to replace me. If she was building a case, I was going to build one too. And mine was going to be airtight. The first thing I did was call my sister-in-law back the next morning and ask if she'd be willing to document what she heard at that dinner. To write it down, date it, and keep it somewhere safe. She said yes, without hesitating. She said, "Honestly, this has been going on longer than you know." She told me that before Daniel and I got married, Sandra had made similar comments about her own husband to family members, undermining. Slow, patient. She does it to everyone who threatens her hold on her sons, my sister-in-law said. I just never had the receipts. We were going to get the receipts. I bought a small white device, the kind that looks like a phone charger sitting on a shelf, and I placed it in the living room facing the main entry area. It recorded continuously. I also changed the login on our home Wi-Fi and set up a separate alert system on my phone that notified me whenever the garage door opened. I didn't tell Daniel yet. Not because I wanted to deceive him, but because I knew that if I told him, he would tell her and everything I was building would disappear. I needed him to see it for himself. For the next 3 weeks, I documented everything. The morning she rearranged Lily's closet by color and left a note that said, "Just trying to make mornings easier for you." The afternoon she picked up the mail from the front step, came inside, and I found her reading a card from my OB's office before I'd even seen it myself. The visit where she sat at my kitchen table and pulled out her phone and started typing while Lily played nearby, and I stood in the hallway where she couldn't see me and watched her take 4 separate photos of the room. I kept a written log in a notes app. Date, time, what happened, what was said, word for word when I could manage it. I kept it like someone preparing to testify, because I understood by then that that was exactly what I was doing. 3 weeks in, I called Lily's pediatrician and scheduled a wellness visit. I came prepared with written questions. I asked the doctor to note in the record that I had come involuntarily, that I was engaged and informed that Lily's development was on track. The doctor looked at me a little oddly at first, then seemed to understand something and wrote thorough notes. She also said, without my asking, that Lily was one of the most well-adjusted 2-year-olds she'd seen that quarter. I thanked her and asked if I could have a printed summary of the visit. She printed 2 copies. I also made an appointment with a family therapist. Not because I was falling apart though, some days I came close, but because I wanted a professional on record who had seen me, spoken with me, and could speak to my stability if it ever came to that. At the end of the second session, I asked her to write a brief letter confirming I had sought proactive counseling and was functioning well. She didn't ask why. She wrote it. During all of this, Sandra kept arriving, and I kept smiling. That was the hardest part. Smiling while she walked through my garage door and commented on the dishes and photographed my living room. Smiling while she texted Daniel little breadcrumbs that I now knew were carefully planted. Smiling while she sat on my couch and held my daughter and looked at me with those soft, pitying eyes that said, "Poor thing, you're barely keeping up." I smiled and I waited. The moment I had been waiting for arrived on a Thursday afternoon in October. Sandra called Daniel, not me, Daniel, and suggested a family lunch that Sunday. His aunt and uncle from Columbus. His cousin and her new husband. His grandmother, who was visiting from Sarasota. 11 people total. Sandra offered to host, and then, somehow, through a series of exchanges I wasn't fully included in, the lunch migrated to our house. Of course it did. Daniel mentioned it Thursday evening, sheepish in that particular way he got when he knew he'd done something without fully consulting me. I smiled and said that sounded nice. He looked relieved. I went to bed early and lay in the dark and thought about Sunday. I cooked on Saturday. I cleaned on Saturday night. By Sunday morning, The house was the cleanest it had been in months, not because I was performing for Sandra, but because I wanted every possible variable she might weaponize to simply not exist. The laundry was done. The counters were clear. Lily's toys were organized in the living room the way she liked them, within reach but in labeled bins. There was nothing to photograph. Sandra arrived 40 minutes early. White blouse, pearl earrings, a dish she'd brought that she set on the counter without asking if there was room. She scanned the hallway first, the way she always did, and I watched her almost imperceptibly recalibrate when she found nothing to comment on. The rest of the family arrived in clusters. Hugs, noise, the good chaos of people who haven't seen each other in a while. Lily ran from lap to lap, delighted. I played the role I always played at these things: attentive host, warm daughter-in-law, competent mother. Lunch was good. The conversation was easy. I sat across from Daniel, who caught my eye a few times with a smile that said he was happy, that the day was going well. Then Sandra tapped the side of her water glass with a spoon. It was so similar to what I had imagined, replayed, dreaded, that for a moment I felt outside my own body. I saw the table go quiet. I saw her reach into the bag she'd brought and set beside her chair. I saw her pull out a small stack of printed photos. She didn't rush. She never rushed. She let the silence gather before she spoke. I want to say something because I think this family needs to have a conversation we've been avoiding. Daniel looked at her. His aunt leaned forward slightly. His grandmother set down her fork. I love Lily more than anything in this world. She paused on that, gave it room. And because I love her, I have to be honest about some concerns I've had. About her environment. She placed the photos face down on the table like she was about to deal cards. I haven't wanted to cause drama. That's not who I am. She glanced at me briefly, just briefly, with an expression that managed to be both apologetic and entirely certain. But I think we owe it to that little girl to talk openly. She turned the photos over. Dishes in the sink. A basket of laundry near the couch. Lily's art supplies spread across the dining table mid-project, the mudroom with shoes by the door. All of it time-stamped, printed in color. I've been documenting for a few months, she said quietly. Not to be vindictive, but because I was worried and I didn't know what else to do. The table was very still. Daniel's aunt was looking at the photos. His cousin's husband was looking at the floor. His grandmother was looking at me. I looked at Sandra, and I smiled. Thank you, I said. She blinked. Actually, I was hoping we'd have a chance to look at some documentation today, too. I reached under my chair, where I had placed a folder before anyone arrived, and set it on the table. Since we're doing this, I opened the folder. Inside was Lily's most recent pediatric report, the growth charts and developmental assessments. The doctor's note confirming a proactive wellness visit, full vaccination records current through the month, the therapist's letter, and printed screenshots of Sandra's text messages to Daniel over the past 3 months. 14 of them, each one a carefully worded breadcrumb. The laundry note, the messy house note, the one that said, I just worry Lily's not getting enough stimulation. I wonder if Rachel is engaging with her enough during work hours. I had organized them in chronological order. I slid the stack toward the center of the table so everyone could see. Lily is healthy, I said. My voice was very calm. I had practiced this calmness. She is developing exactly on track. She sees her pediatrician regularly. She eats well. She sleeps well. She is one of the happiest kids I have ever known. I paused. What you're looking at in those photos is a home where a child actually lives, where she plays and makes art and leaves her shoes by the door, because that's what 2-year-olds do. Sandra had gone very still. I also want to share something else, I continued. And I picked up my phone from beside my plate and connected it to the small Bluetooth speaker I'd set on the counter that morning, framed between a candle and a bowl of fruit, so it looked like it belonged there. What came through the speaker first was Sandra's voice. Her voice in my kitchen, 8 weeks prior. While she thought I was in the backyard with Lily, she'd called someone I later figured out it was Daniel's aunt, the woman sitting 3 seats away from her right now, and the call had been picked up by the device I'd placed on the shelf. I had 17 minutes of audio. I played 2 minutes of Sandra describing my home as unstable. Of her saying she'd been talking to a woman at her church who happened to be a family attorney and who told her there were grounds. Of her saying she didn't want it to come to that, but she was prepared if it did. Of her saying she just couldn't stand by and watch that child be raised in chaos by a woman who clearly resented being a mother. I resented being a mother. I stopped the audio. The table was so quiet I could hear the refrigerator hum from across the room. Daniel was not looking at his mother. He was looking at the speaker. Then he looked at me. Then he looked at his mother. Mom. His voice came out low and entirely unlike himself. What was that? It wasn't a question. It was something between disbelief and recognition. The sound a person makes when something they've been half-sensing for a long time suddenly has a shape and a name. Sandra straightened. I was venting to a friend. That's not. You were talking to an attorney. Daniel's jaw moved. About our daughter. I was exploring options. Because I was worried. You were worried, he repeated. So you went to an attorney and took photos of our home and sent me texts he reached across and touched the printed screenshots without picking them up for months. Building some kind of case. Someone had to. The silence after that sentence was absolute. Daniel pushed his chair back. Not dramatically, not loudly. He just pushed it back and stood up and looked at his mother with an expression I had never seen on his face before. He said, I think you should go. Daniel. Mom. He said it the way you say a word when you're done talking. Please go. His aunt stood up. His cousin reached across and put a hand on her husband's arm. His grandmother was looking at her hands in her lap. Sandra stood slowly. She picked up her bag. She did not pick up the photos. She looked at me with something I couldn't entirely read, anger, maybe, or the very first trembling edge of shame, and she said, You recorded me. In my own home, I said. Yes. That's not. It's legal in this state, I said quietly. I checked. She looked at Daniel once more. He didn't look back. And then she walked through the dining room, through the hallway, past Lily's coat on the hook by the door, and let herself out the front. Not through the garage. The front door closed behind her with a soft, final sound. Nobody spoke for a long moment. Then Daniel's grandmother picked up her fork and said, very quietly, The chicken was excellent, Rachel. And somehow, in the strangest and most tender way, that tiny sentence opened the room back up. People started talking again. Softly at first. Then with more ease. Plates were passed. Someone refilled their water. His aunt caught my eye and gave me a look that contained something like years of understanding compressed into a single second. She'd seen it too. She'd watched it happen before. She just hadn't had the folder. Daniel helped clear the dishes after everyone left. We moved around the kitchen without speaking, the good quiet kind that sometimes follows something enormous. Lily had fallen asleep on the couch, her cheek pressed against a throw pillow, one hand curled near her face. He stopped in the middle of loading the dishwasher and turned around and leaned against the counter and looked at me. How long? He asked. How long has she been doing it, or how long have I known? He thought about that. Both. She's been doing it since before we moved in, I said. I started putting it together about 4 months ago. He looked at the ceiling. I watched him process things, watched him sort through memories and reframe them. I knew that thing he was doing, because I'd done it myself. All the times he'd said she means well, all the gentle minimizing, all the space he'd unconsciously made for her at my expense. I'm sorry, he said. The 2 words were quiet and simply spoken, and I felt them land somewhere that had been waiting a long time. I know you didn't see it, I said. She made sure you didn't. I should have looked harder. Yeah. I let that sit. You should have. He nodded. He didn't try to defend himself further. I appreciated that more than I could say. 2 days later, I sent Sandra a letter by certified mail. My sister-in-law helped me draft it, and I'd had a lawyer look it over before it went out. It was not unkind. It did not list grievances or relitigate what had happened at the table. It simply stated that access to our home was revoked, that all future visits with Lily would be scheduled in advance and agreed upon by both Daniel and me, and that any further attempt to interfere with my parental standing through private communication, through third parties, through legal channels would be met with a formal response. The garage code was changed that same afternoon. Sandra did not respond for 9 days. When she did, it was a handwritten note, 2 short paragraphs. She said she had thought she was protecting her granddaughter. She said she understood now that she had crossed lines she had no right to cross. She did not apologize for the recording, but she apologized for the attorney conversation, and she said she would like to be part of Lily's life if we'd allow it. On whatever terms we set. Daniel read the note twice and then set it on the kitchen table and looked at me. "That's up to you," he said. I thought about it for a long time. About what it would mean to let her in, and what it would cost to keep her out. About Lily, who loved her grandmother in the uncomplicated way that small children love people, without knowing the subtext. About the kind of family I wanted us to be, not the one his mother had been trying to architect without my consent, but a real one. Messy and boundaried and honest. I drafted a response myself, no lawyer this time. I wrote it in the evenings over 3 days, deleting and rewriting until it said exactly what I meant. I told her she was welcome to visit on scheduled Sundays, 2 hours, at our house or a neutral location. I told her I would not pretend the last 4 months hadn't happened, but I also wouldn't hold them over her indefinitely if she chose to behave differently. I told her that I needed her to understand, once and for all, that I was Lily's mother. Not a placeholder. Not a problem to be managed. Her mother. And that position was not up for review. And then I wrote one final thing, because it was true, and I wanted her to carry it. I told her that if she ever doubted what kind of mother I was, she was welcome to ask Lily. I sent the letter. I went and stood in the doorway of Lily's room and watched her sleep for a little while. The yellow nightlight on her dresser. Her stuffed rabbit tucked against her chin. The soft, even pull of her breathing. The house around me was quiet in a way it hadn't been in over a year. Not emptier, not lonelier, not the quiet of something taken away. It was the quiet of something returned.